The first item on the agenda is a special order of business. We have House Bill 1069, Representative Meeks. Representative Meeks, you're recognized. Representative Meeks, if you would identify yourself, state the district that you represent, and you're recognized to present your amendment.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues. First, I've got two amendments that we're going to look at. The first one's pretty straightforward. I'm going to add a list of co-sponsors. Second one, we're going to hold off on for right now, and I'll get to what that one is when we get into the discussion of the bill. But the first one is just to add co-sponsors, and once everyone has a chance to look at it, I'll make a motion to pass on the amendment.
All right. Looks like just an amendment to add co-sponsors. You have a motion, Representative Meeks?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, do pass on the amendment.
All right. Got a motion to pass on the amendment. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Amendment's been adopted. Representative Meeks, you're recognized.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Again, Representative Stephen Meeks, District 42. This bill that we're about to look at, colleagues, is arguably the most consequential bill that we're going to look at this session. And I know a lot of people say, you know, what's the big deal? We're only talking about an hour, right? But this bill literally affects the health and well-being, both physically and mentally, of every citizen of the state. This bill affects our economy, and this bill affects the outcome of student achievement across the state. So for those reasons, I would argue that this is going to be one of the most important bills, if not the most important bill we look at this session. So I'm going to make three quick points, and then I'm going to tell you the story about how we ended up where we are, where we're at today. So my first point is this: that standard time is natural time as told by the sun. We were designed as humans to operate off of standard time, and anytime we get away from that natural rhythm of nature, there's a cost to it. Second point that I'll make: in the winter, the day is 10 hours long. In the summer, it is 14 hours long, regardless of what our clocks say. I think, unfortunately, some people think that daylight saving time magically creates an extra hour in the day. It does not, right? It's like, you know, government, you take a towel, you cut the top inch off the towel, you sew it back to the bottom, and you convince people you got a longer towel, right? I've heard that analogy used in this situation. Last thing, foundation I will throw out is that when we talk about time, when we use AM and PM, those are actually units of measure. I know most people don't understand what AM and PM is, what those definitions are, but like the inch, the mile, or the gallon, those are actual standards of measurements. And what happens is every summer when we go to daylight saving time, we make those measurements worthless. It would be like saying that during the summer months, the foot, instead of being 12 inches long, is now going to be 13 inches long, and the gallon, instead of being 64 ounces, we're going to make it 65 ounces. That's what we're doing. And if anyone wants to get into that more details, I'm glad to do that during the question and answer section. So how did we get to where we're at? So the story of daylight saving time actually begins back during World War I in Germany. Germany was the first country to implement daylight saving time. It was done with the idea that it would save lighting oil for lamps. It would save energy. The thought is that if you get people to get up an hour earlier, they'll go to bed an hour earlier before the sun sets. But we all know that that is not actually what happens in reality, and that's partly where the rub comes in. So since Germany did it, the United States followed. So we did it for 1 year during World War I, and then it became known as wartime. After World War I, we went back to standard time. We stayed on standard time until we got into World War II. Once again, the nation went on what was called wartime. That wartime was year-round daylight saving time. It was the first time that our country attempted to do year-round daylight saving time. At the end of World War II, when we went back to standard time, the year-round daylight saving time only had a 17% approval rating. So in other words, the overwhelming majority of Americans were opposed to daylight saving time year-round. They had just experienced it. After World War II, we had about a 20-year-long period or so that we were on natural time. Brings us to the year 1965. So what I want to do is I want to kind of use our imaginations here a little bit. Pretend it's the year 1965. By irony, it would be the 65th General Assembly. Our predecessors are all sitting around this table, just like we are here today, and I were to bring you a bill that was trying to introduce daylight saving time. So again, we're on standard time year-round. It's the way it's always been. But I bring you a bill because I want to put Arkansas on daylight saving time. And so once I present that bill, you guys would start to ask questions, as is customary. And you might ask a question like, Representative Meeks, why would we do this? Don't most businesses already offer a summer schedule for employees? And I would say yes, because back during that time, a lot of businesses had a summer schedule which allowed their employees to come in early and get off early so they can enjoy those extra hours in the evening. So instead of switching our clocks, they were switching their schedules. Then you might ask, well, does daylight saving time actually save energy? Because that's what it was purported to do. And I would have to tell you, no. All studies that have looked at that have said daylight saving time does not save energy. Then you might ask, well, does this improve the health of our citizens by having that extra daylight in the evening? And again, I'd have to say no. You might say, well, would there be a benefit to the economy? Again, the answer is no. And so after this long chain of questions, you'd finally get to the point, why are we even doing this, right? And so here would be what my answer is. Back during World War II, the retailers in the largest cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, they realized that by having longer evening hours, that meant shoppers stayed out later and shopped, because in the big cities, it was not safe to be out after dark. And so what a lot of these cities did is, in order to improve retail sales, they started going to daylight saving time. But because there was no standard across the country, what ended up happening was the time of year that New York was on daylight saving time was different than the time of year that Chicago was on daylight saving time, was different than the time of year that Boston, Baltimore, they all had these different ways they did daylight saving time. And so what ended up happening was it created a lot of confusion for people that were traveling. So for example, if you were traveling between Little Rock and, say, Nashville, you might go through 3, 4, 5 different time changes, because when you got to Forest City, they were on daylight saving time. Then you go back to standard time. Then Memphis, you jump back to daylight saving. Then you jump back, and it was creating mass confusion across the country. So finally, in 1966, the Uniform Time Standard came out. And in the Uniform Time Standard, what that said was that all states across the nation will go on daylight saving time. It'll begin at the same time for everybody everywhere. It'll end at the same time for everybody everywhere. And the only other option you have, besides what we've mandated in Congress, is that if you want, you can exempt yourself and stay on standard time year-round. The only state that took advantage of that, the only 2 states that took advantage of that, were Arizona and Hawaii. Now, think about Arizona. So for the last 60 years, Arizona has been on standard time year-round. They've been surrounded by states that have gone back and forth to daylight saving time over those 60 years. And you know what? Arizona has never gone to daylight saving time. I talked to a constituent of mine. He used to live in Arizona, and he said that he was hopeful that Arkansas would join Arizona in staying on standard time, because they don't understand the craziness of this back and forth that we do. As a matter of fact, you look at polling across the country, 80% of people hate the back and forth. They want us to lock the clocks. The only option we have to lock the clock as it currently stand is to go to standard time year-round. And so that's what this bill purports to do. Now, what are the costs of us continuing to go back and forth? chronic sleep deprivation, and that's where the big problem is here, because when we adjust the clock, that evening daylight hours wants to drag us back to standard time, because our clocks our biological clocks are driven by the sun. That extra light at night keeps trying to drag us back to standard time. The light in the morning, which we are robbing, is actually the more important light for our health. So we're stealing the light that we need for our health benefits. We're putting it at the end of the day because, we want to use it for, playtime, recreational activities, things like that. What is the cost of daylight saving time? Estimates are generally in different different levels, but the latest estimates say that the United States loses an estimated $400 billion annually in lost productivity and increased health care costs because of the poor sleep that daylight savings times brings. The additional car accidents, long-term mental health issues that strain businesses, families, and the economies. Teenagers are the ones who are the most susceptible to this. Teenagers are the most sleep-deprived group of any age in the United States. Studies show that anywhere between 70 to 80% of high school students are getting insufficient sleep. This is largely due to these earlier work times. Teenagers, the way their biological clocks are wired, they are wired to be up later. If you've ever had a teenager, you might remember what it was like being a teenager. It was difficult to get up in the morning because our biology, when we're teenagers, wants to have us getting up later in the morning. And when we make our teenagers get up earlier, they're going to school more tired, they're going to school crankier, and that leads to poorer educational outcomes. Sleep-deprived teens have lower grades, lower test scores. They have more car crashes caused by drowsing driving. There's increases in drug and alcohol use, lower graduation rates, higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, aggressive behavior, and carrying of weapons, all because of daylight saving time. There was one study that found that by getting rid of daylight saving time, we could add billions of dollars to our economy every year simply by the increased graduation rate of our high school students because of this issue. Now let's talk about adults. Studies show that disrupted sleep leads to adverse outcomes, including significant increases in heart attacks, and these effects linger for days after we make the shift. We all just made the shift. We understand the impact that it has. Studies have shown that adopting permanent standard time could prevent over 5,000 suicides annually by reducing seasonal depression, decreasing errors, injuries, absenteeism in the workplace, and could potentially prevent 1,300 traffic deaths per year. So understand this. This decision that you're going to make today regarding this bill is going to have real-world impacts, life and death, on the citizens of our state. Now, there are people, as we debate this issue, like I said, 80% of people are ready for us to stop the back and forth. They're ready for us to lock the clocks. The debate becomes, do we go to permanent standard time or do we go to permanent daylight saving time? As I mentioned, permanent daylight saving time was tried during World War II. It failed. Y'all know the axiom, if we don't learn from history, we're due to repeat it. 1974, during the energy crisis, they tried it again, permanent daylight saving time. After 9 months, it was repealed. It failed. The United States is not the only country that have tried this. 3 other countries have tried permanent year-round daylight saving time. Most recently, it was Portugal in 1996. They all failed. Every time daylight saving time has been tried permanently, it has failed. So when you add up the cost to health, when you add up the cost to the economy, when you look at the impact to students, there is really only one choice if we want to lock the clocks and stop this back and forth, and that is to go to permanent standard time. Here with me at the end of the table, I'm going to let her introduce herself, but this is Ms. Fast. She is a behavioral sleep specialist, and I'm going to let her kind of talk about what she's experienced in her work related to this issue and why we need to take this important step.
Thank you, Representative Meeks. My name is Elsbeth Fast, and I'm a behavioral sleep specialist. I'm also an adjunct professor at the Alice Walton School of Medicine. I was a master trainer and consultant for CBT for insomnia with the Department of Veterans Affairs for 15 years. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 1069. I agree 100% with Representative Meeks. This bill to eliminate daylight savings time in Arkansas and observe standard time year-round is an investment in the long-term health of Arkansans. HB 1069 is in alignment with the wisdom of our body's circadian rhythm, which is your internal body clock. But we actually have every cell in our body is dictated by our body clock and our circadian rhythm. This bill is in alignment with the recommendations of our most respected institutions, including the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the American Medical Association, and the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine, of which I'm a member. This past Sunday at 2 a.m., Arkansans and approximately 300 million other people around the world experienced a shifting forward of our external clocks, so the clock on your wrist, the wall, your phone, but our internal clocks were left as is. This incongruency, as Representative Meeks said, causes a whole host of really dire health consequences. Our circadian rhythm is impacted by many things, but by far the most powerful cue is light exposure. Our daily sleep-wake cycle is reliant on bright light exposure in the morning and darkness or the absence of light in the evening. I frequently hear from clients that they want that extra hour of daylight in the evening, but I can tell you as someone that's been treating insomnia for over 30 years, the presence of daylight in the evening actually contributes to insomnia. We need morning sunlight, not evening sunlight, to help the epidemic of insomnia that we're seeing across Arkansas and the nation. We have a wealth of evidence that this morning sunlight, what would be preserved by HB 1069, is far more beneficial to our sleep, mood, and overall physical health than that extra hour in the evening. Exposure to morning light strengthens our circadian clock. This misalignment when we go through this spring transition does not last for just a couple of days. It can last up until the time in November when we transition back. We know this change impacts cardiovascular health, increases the risk of diabetes and obesity. It reduces our cognitive performance and impedes our mental health. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine published a powerful position statement illuminating this risk in very sobering terms while making the distinction between the acute and the chronic effects of switching between daylight savings time and standard time. Along with increases in heart rate and blood pressure, the switch also causes immune system alterations and alters gene expression. This is very important because scientists have discovered that alterations in gene expression are what can sort of flip on and off genes that may otherwise stay turned off, increasing potentially the risk for cancer. And we see that, this is not us guessing at the effects. Like, we can see this in states where they observe year-round standard time, and we can also see it in states where, on the western side, people are getting more morning sunlight exposure. In addition, to these more immediate measurable risks, we get less sleep following daylight savings time due to the lack of morning sun and too much sunlight exposure in the evening. Chronic insomnia also contributes to poor short-term memory, increased risk of dementia, and lower productivity. Many Arkansans with insomnia do not have access to the most effective treatments for insomnia, like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, but by restoring standard time year-round, we could prevent the development of insomnia for a large percentage of the population. It is undeniable that we have an overwhelming amount of evidence that daylight savings time is detrimental to every aspect of our well-being. So I am here today in support of this bill.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, when we switched to daylight saving time, as I had mentioned early on, we were forcing everybody to get up an hour earlier. But because of that extra light that we have in the evening, we don't go to bed an hour earlier. So on average, every adult is losing 20 minutes of sleep per night. Every teenager, as I talked about, is losing about 30 minutes of sleep per night. Those cumulative effects over time lead to these impacts that we're talking about here. Just about every major medical, and I've got a long list here that I could go through. Most major medical associations have said we need to go to permanent standard time. The PTA, the National Parent Teachers Association, they promote standard time because of the impact that it has on our students. And there's numerous other organizations. Just for grins, I said, okay, we've got all these people saying we need to get rid of daylight saving time. Are there any organizations who are promoting saying we need to stay on daylight saving time? The only organizations that I found goes back to the original one, the retailers, the hospitality, those few people that benefit from that extra daylight at night. But everybody else that has looked at this says we need to go back to natural time as told by the sun. I'm going to make just a few more points, and then we'll open it up to questions. One of the common questions that I get on this is, what about those of us that live on the border, right? There could be some confusion between, if we're on standard time and my neighbor state next door is on daylight saving time. Arkansas is kind of in a somewhat unique position on the western half of the country, not having any bordering states that touch a time zone change. I'm not going to list them, but there are actually 12 states in the country that are divided by time zones. So, for example, Tennessee, half the state's in central, half the state is in eastern. They've adopted to handle that difference. Florida, part of the state is in central, part of the state is eastern. Those people have adopted to be able to understand those changes. Over half the states in the country either border a time zone or have a time zone running through. Those folks have all adopted to those changes. I have no doubt that we in Arkansas can do the same. And I would further make this argument. Which is the weightier issue? People being inconvenienced by having a time zone difference over the border, or the health and welfare of our citizens? I would say, are we going to damage the health and welfare of our citizens just so people don't get confused about what time their dentist appointment is? I hope not. The last thing I will finish with before we open it up to questions, I do have a second amendment that I have prepared. So the way the bill is drafted right now is, if it is passed, next year Arkansas will go on and stay on standard time year round. There are allowances within the bill that if the federal government does adopt year-round daylight saving time, if we've got to repeat the same mistake as our forebears, that Arkansas would follow that. We would go to year-round daylight savings time as long as it was required by Congress. So the purpose of this bill is we're going to lock the clock either way. My preference is standard time. That's the only option we have available to us right now. But if Congress says daylight saving time, then we'll do daylight saving time. The other thing that it allows is it allows state employees, where is practical, the opportunity to have a summer schedule. So if it makes more sense for them to come in an hour early, or if they want to come in that hour early so they can take advantage of some extra daylight in the evening, we allow for that. That would have the benefit of maybe spreading out rush hour a little bit, reducing rush hour traffic, which who could be against that, right? And my hope is that businesses would follow similarly by creating that allowance. The amendment that I have prepared is this. It would take the bill and change it from we are going to do this next year, and would turn it into a trigger bill. So what that means is we would continue doing the back and forth until one of our surrounding states also agreed to adopt daylight saving time, also agreed to adopt permanent standard time. Then at that point, we would go to standard time. I kind of liken daylight saving time to smoking, right? People who are addicted to the smoking and the nicotine, they can come up with excuses for why smoking is beneficial, right? It helps calm my nerves. It helps me in my social circles. But we all understand the damaging health ramifications caused by smoking and nicotine. And what happens sometimes is you can imagine a group of 5 friends who are all smokers. They all understand the need to quit, but nobody wants to be first. If one of them had the strength to be first, the rest of them would stop. But what happens is they end up being locked in a lifetime of these negative health consequences because no one is willing to take that step to go first. That's what I'm asking you. If Arkansas takes the step to do this first, there are 30 other states around this country that have bills to do this exact same thing. The reason why they keep failing is because nobody wants to step out and go first. I have every confidence that if we will be a leader in this, it'll definitely make national headlines, and it will encourage other states to take that step with us. If the best we can do today is make it a trigger bill, then so be it. I will leave that up to the will of the committee. If we want to handle it as is, that's great. If somebody would like to turn it into a trigger bill, would like to make an amendment to do so, I would consider that a friendly amendment, or if it's the will of the committee, I will make that motion myself. So 2 options are on the table for us this morning, and with that, Mr. Chairman, we will open it up to any questions from the committee.
All right. Representative Meeks has explained the bill. We do have some questions by the committee. Representative Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Meeks, I appreciate the persistence. You've done this quite a bit since you've been here. I've got a couple things. My background is as a broadcaster, right? And so I've spent 15 years of my life in syndication and things like that. If we were to do this, right, and let's just hypothetically say there's a Razorback game that's at 11 o'clock, all right, but everybody else is still in Central Time, and it would be at noon, it messes up all broadcast syndications across for not only our local partners, but even regional partners. Would you not agree?
I agree that definitely could be a concern. But I also understand that, for example, Columbus, Georgia is sitting right on the border between the time zones. They've got that exact same issue, and they've found ways to deal with it. Between Tallahassee and Pensacola, Florida, same issue. Pierre, North Dakota, the capital up there, time zone runs right through the middle of the city practically. And so this issue is dealt with other places across the country. And so, again, it's kind of like going back to my nicotine example. You can find some good to this, and I understand that concern, which is why I have this trigger option in here to try to maybe placate that a little bit. But if I have to look at the 2 harms, the harm to the broadcasters over, maybe some confusion, or the harm to our citizens and our children, how am I going to weigh those? I'm going to put our citizens and our children first.
Mr. Chair, if you'll give me a little leeway, I've got a series.
You're recognized. Go ahead.
So I'm glad you said that about children, because this has been a topic of conversation in my neighborhood. So we've got 45 houses in our neighborhood, and we actually had our POA meeting this last week, and this bill got brought up. Okay. And I did not have one person that said, well, wouldn't the health of our kids being able to play outside longer, wouldn't that be beneficial as well? And when we're talking about health and our kids being able to play outside we're advocating, look, we just took cell phones out of schools, so you're not on iPads. We want them to be outside. Would you agree that having it lighter outside to have them play outside would be beneficial?
So, and I don't know if you've got any input here. So, what ends up on one end level, yes, we definitely want our kids to be outside enjoying the sunshine. But what ends up happening is because we push that daylight so far into the evening that it makes it more difficult for children to go to sleep at night. And because of that, they're losing sleep that is vital for their health. So you almost got two choices here. Do we want them exercising or do we want them getting the sleep they need, right? She might have some more thoughts on that. But the other thing that I would say is that I have heard from teachers across the state, numerous teachers across the state, who have told me that one of their concerns is that when we go to daylight savings time, that these sporting activities stay later and later and later into the evening. The students are getting less sleep, and they see that in their students when they're coming to school the next day, which affects their academic performance. And so, like I said, the teachers are saying they're seeing this. They're seeing how it's robbing our students of their academics. And so when you look at these two, again, we're having to make a choice here. Would we rather them play outside for an extra 30 minutes at night, or would we rather have them using that time to get the sleep that they need so that they can perform better in their studies the next day?
And I can second that. I mean, we actually, in the mental health community, we're seeing an epidemic of suicidal ideation and depression in teens that is very much tied to lack of sleep and insomnia. And even within my private practice, several months ago, I treated a 14-year-old whose pediatrician contacted me because he, reported having suicidal ideation and depression. And the pediatrician wanted to put him on an antidepressant medication. And this 14-year-old, had the wisdom to say, I really feel like if I could sleep, I would be less depressed and not have suicidal ideation. And sure enough, with the help of CBT for insomnia and us getting him to bed earlier, using, blackout curtains at night and, increased sunlight exposure in the morning, his depression and suicidal ideation cleared up within weeks. So there is a really strong connection between sleep and mood for every person walking the planet, but particularly for teenagers. And one reason why teenagers' circadian rhythm is shifted forward and delayed is they really need a significant amount of deep REM sleep in order to, knit together different regions of their brain and develop their frontal lobes. And unfortunately, morning sunlight is a key component of being able to sleep at night. We are very much meant to have our sleep patterns in conjunction with the rising and setting of the sun. And when we kind of disobey that natural sort of law, it's really at our own peril.
Yeah, and I would follow up. My wife and I, we homeschool our daughter, and she's a teenager as well. And we let her sleep in the morning until she's ready to get up, and just that alone gives her a huge advantage over her peers that are going to public school. That we're forcing right here before we do our testing to see how we're doing compared to other states. We're forcing them to get up an hour earlier, right before we're having them take those critical tests.
Okay, I'll have one more question and I'll be done, Mr. Chair, for now.
And I appreciate these questions.
Yeah,
these are good questions. This, even if this bill doesn't go anywhere, we're having a very important discussion that we need to have.
And I agree, and the debate has been going on for many, many years. Yeah. And I was doing some research last night, and Wall Street Journal and some others talked about energy consumption, right? And that with daylight savings time, it also reduces energy consumption amongst people that are within the daylight savings time period. Would you agree that is a positive for daylight savings time?
So it's been so told us that, but the studies I've looked at said it's the exact opposite.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is you're shifting that demand from the evening to the morning. Okay. And so it doesn't, it doesn't play out. And in the summer, by people staying up later, you're running your air conditioners more. Whereas, you start going to bed, you might turn the air conditioner down, whatever. But anyways, the studies I've seen, there's practically no difference in the energy usage. There was a senator back when we did the change back in 1974 that he lamented that when Congress put us on year-round daylight saving time, he said Congress did so without any studies, without even looking at it. And he said back then when they went to year-round daylight saving time, at best there might have been 1-2% energy savings, and so it's almost non-existent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Wooldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Meeks, for bringing this forward. I agree with you. It is an important discussion. I think that we all, obviously care about our children, and I appreciate the comments about insomnia. I'm also a behavioral health professional, and I think there are a lot of other areas that lead to that with, stress in schools and screen time and, hormones change during puberty. All those kind of things reset that clock and make a difference. I don't know that standard time is necessarily the culprit for all of that, but I do have a question when we talk about being part of a time zone, and you keep using the analogy of a time zone running through a state. Well, those are still established time zones. So when you know what time you're on, I guess my question for you would be, when people come into Arkansas, we may all get used to it being on Arkansas time, but how would the rest of the world, as they travel through or they're inbound coming through the state, they're coming here for ball games or activities or business, I mean, how would they know? What would we do to alert them that you think your conference starts at 9 a.m. Central Time, but it really starts at 9 a.m. Arkansas time?
Right.
How would you even?
Right.
How would that work?
Sure. So again, Arizona's been doing this for a very long time, and I think in this regard, technology is the answer. If you've got a watch on, you've got your phone, it syncs. So as soon as you land in that new time zone, your phone and your watch are automatically going to sync. I know as I drive across the country, as soon as I, within 5 miles of crossing that time zone line, my phone and my watch on my wrist, they change automatically, and so I don't foresee that being a real big issue.
So follow up, Mr. Chair. If we were to change this and adopt this regular time, then whatever causes that to sync up to iPhones and watches and all that would automatically be adopted by those platforms?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, just the cell phone carriers, the people who program our computers, all that, they would just make that change in the software so that if you're in Arkansas, you just don't spring forward and backwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and kind of along that point, I'll throw this out as well. If we were to try this and it turned into an absolute catastrophe, what we could do? You just run another bill and we'll go back to swapping back and forth, right?
Well, I appreciate that. Obviously the time it would take for us to come back into session and run another bill to swap it back, there'd be chaos for a 2-year period. Have you gotten any confirmation from cell phone carriers or these other platforms that they would indeed make these algorithm changes that would automatically update that?
I've not talked to them, but I have no doubt that would take place. Like I said, it happens in Arizona every year. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I read an article from someone who in Arizona who was praying that the rest of the country would join them staying on standard time.
Representative McElroy, you're recognized.
Thank you. Representative Meeks, I agree that it affects our sleep habits. This Sunday, I slept through the sermon, and then I had to go home and take another. I had to take another hour nap after I got home.
Right.
That takes care of it. But I agree that switching back and forth it really affects me and other people. But where the rub is, half of my neighbors and friends are for one side, and half's for the other.
Right.
Have you ever thought about a compromise by splitting it 30 minutes and leaving it alone?
If I could do that, that might be something to consider, but unfortunately, federal law doesn't give us that choice.
And Mr. Chair, I represent the Delta part of a lot of the Mississippi River Delta, and we have some crossings there, and you touched on it, and a lot of them work in Mississippi and Memphis, and they go back and forth. Do you really think that this would be better handled at a federal level where everybody? I agree wholly that we need to do something, but it's really going to cause confusion at Helena and people working back and forth.
So to answer your question, I had that same problem Sunday morning trying to stay awake during the sermon, and we all did because of that jolt to our system. Yes, would I love for Congress to handle this and do it nationwide? I think that would be the best possible way to do it. But do I have any faith that Congress will? No, none, practically. But if states would start doing this, then I think at some point Congress would step in and do it nationwide. But until they start seeing that there is a large public outcry to get this done, we're going to be forever trapped in this back and forth. And our citizens are going to pay that price. And again, kind of like I talked about, could there be some confusion on that cross border? Sure, but which is the greater evil? That concern for that confusion, or the health of our citizens, teenagers, suicide rates? Which one of those is the weightier matter? And for me, it's a simple choice.
Well, I thank you, Representative Meeks, for bringing this to our attention, and maybe we'll get some federal attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Meeks, I am tired just from listening to you. There is so much confusion that goes with this that I would be the one to say, let's do the trigger bill.
Okay.
If the federal government does it, then we all do it at the same time.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to do that. So what the trigger bill would do is it would say that we'll continue the back and forth until one of our neighboring states agrees to join us in this effort. And just to give you, Texas had 4 bills to do this.
Okay. I guess follow up.
You're recognized.
I guess I kind of misunderstood that. So the trigger bill would not just be a trigger bill for when Congress does it for the whole U.S. We would still go back and forth until that happened.
So, if Congress acted, then it would be superfluous anything that we did here within the state. And so, what the trigger would be is the way the law is, federal law is right now. We can go to standard time and stay permanently on standard time. What the trigger bill would do is it would say that we in Arkansas will continue to go back and forth with daylight saving time until one of our neighboring states agrees to go to standard time as well. So, for example, as I said, there are 4 bills in Texas to try to put them on year-round standard time. If they were to adopt that bill in their state, then Arkansas and Texas would both go to standard time year-round. Or if it was Missouri or Tennessee, there have been standard time bills in all these states around us. So if one of our neighboring states agreed to do it with us, then we would go to year-round standard time.
Okay. Follow up, please.
You're recognized.
I would like to see a trigger bill to where we don't do anything different until Congress makes a decision.
There would be no point to a bill like that, because if Congress makes a decision, then
it just happens.
Then it just happens, right?
Well, I agree.
I mean, we could pass a resolution encouraging Congress to take action,
which I think we've done before.
Right, but just to say we're going to pass a bill so that when Congress does something, we'll follow it. It happens about through the supremacy clause anyway, so it would be superfluous to do that.
I just think it's too confusing. Thank you.
All right. right, seeing no further questions by the committee, are there any? Okay, Representative Long, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been talked before about this, but I thought I needed to bring up one last time.
Yeah.
As a part-time farmer, like there's thousands of others here in Arkansas, that extra hour of daylight when you get home from work to be able to take care of your animals and stuff, I think there's a lot of efficiency gain there that maybe you may be overlooking, because when you're out there doing it with a headlamp, it doesn't go so well, And that's always been one of my main concerns is losing that productivity on the farm.
Sure. So I'll address that just real quick. First point, when daylight saving time was first implemented back in the 1960s, the farmers were the group that were the most vehemently opposed to it, because farmers probably understand better than anyone else that nature operates on standard time. So the animals on the farm, they're going to operate on standard time. The plants, they're going to operate on standard. Everything else in nature is operating on standard time except for us, right? And there's a consequence that comes to that. I've spoken to that issue with folks before, that there is nothing that would forbid folks, if they want to get up that extra hour earlier in the morning to adjust their schedules to be able to take advantage of that. Now, the daylight hours in the summer are always going to be longer regardless of what we do on the clock, because contrary to some belief, the Earth is actually round, and so we're going to have that extra daylight during the summer months. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves, and if we're going to make a shift, let's shift our schedules and not shift our clocks.
Well, I guess one of my problems is like when you work off the farm, you're going to get off whenever the boss man says it's time to get off.
Sure.
And particularly at this time of the year, in the fall too, that extra hour there, that you can take care of a lot of things that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to if it was dark.
Sure. Sure.
Appreciate you trying to answer it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And just to that point, I don't disagree that there are some benefits to the illusion of the extra hour in the evening, but again, that comes at a cost. And are we willing to pay that cost as a society to have that illusion of that extra hour? And in my mind, the cost is just too great.
I was going to just also say, the fact that every major medical organization, including the American Medical Association, is strongly in support of switching to standard time, I think is pretty remarkable. I mean, we have so much science available that feeling off this week that all of us have is not just, I got a little bit less sleep. It really is. Every single person in this room has increased cardiovascular risk, increased risk of stroke, heart attack for weeks following this time change. Like, there are really serious medical consequences to what we're doing. So I agree with Representative Meeks. There's all kinds of inconveniences with making a change like this. It's just a question of whether Arkansas is bold enough to say we care so much about the health and welfare of our citizens that we are going to look at this undeniable science and be the ones to make this change. And then as the years progress, seeing things like increased testing scores, decreased traffic accidents in the morning, decrease heart attack and stroke across the state, that will be when we'd be able to gather in a room like this and say, thank God we looked at what was most important and made that decision.
All right, seeing no further questions by the committee, we do have someone signed up to speak against the bill. Ned Gladner. Mr. Gladner, if you would state your name for the record and any organization you're here representing, and you'll be recognized to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Neal Gladner. I'm the Executive Director of the Arkansas Broadcasters Association.
Sorry, I misread your name. I apologize about that.
My handwriting, Mr. Chairman, not your reading ability.
All right. You're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I can tell you that few things that come before the legislature have garnered as much attention from our members as this bill, and there's no shortage of things at the legislature that have garnered our attention. But this one has a big impact, and many people outside of our business say, why do broadcasters care about this? First, let me start by saying that the broadcast industry might surprise you in terms of its economic impact in Arkansas. A study from Woods and Poole, which is a Washington, D.C. research firm, says that radio and TV in Arkansas have a $9.4 billion impact here and touch over 21,000 jobs. I'm here with the backing of our members, radio and television, in strong opposition to House Bill 1069. Because of the impact that it has on broadcasters, some of which Representative Hawk mentioned earlier. So many radio and especially TV stations have network or syndicated programming, from the nightly news to the primetime programming to syndicated morning shows. This impact on our members, the TV and radio stations that the citizens of Arkansas listen to or watch, is large. For instance, whether you like the program or not, the NBC Nightly News that comes on at 5:30 Central Time all year would come on at 4:30 for approximately 7 months of the year, because that's when the network sends the show. They're not going to send a special edition of that program for Arkansas. If there is a football game in September, let's say CBS picks up the Razorback football game, and that afternoon game starts at 3 o'clock Central Time, regardless of where it's played for CBS, they're not going to run an announcement that says the Razorbacks are playing whoever at 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central, except in Arkansas. They're not going to make that announcement. So that will lead to some confusion and hardships on our member stations. TV stations in particular have so much network programming, so primetime programming during the time of the year when the rest of the country is on daylight savings time, primetime here would start at 6 o'clock and go till 9 o'clock. So that hurts our members, and you might say, well, it's an inconvenience. It's more than an inconvenience. It is a serious business consideration for the radio and television stations of Arkansas because of the expense they would go to have to reprogramming. We just refer to it as our automation, but it is the satellite systems that connect our TV stations to our network partners around the state. They'd either have to purchase very expensive equipment to tape delay the programming, and some of that could not happen, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, because many of the network programs come to affiliates with specific requirements about what time they are broadcast. Radio stations likewise carry syndicated programming. A popular one in Central Arkansas is the Bobby Bones Show on Kissin. That's a 6 to 10 program. It's a national program. All of a sudden, that would be at 5 a.m. until 9 a.m. That hurts the radio station's ability to sell advertising in that program, because an hour of it would be outside of what our industry refers to as morning drive. I mentioned the time difference not only for news and sports and syndicated programming, but it's just a big expense item. We in broadcasting right now face no shortages of challenges from big tech, if you will, and we don't need Arkansas giving us additional challenges in terms of our expense lines so that we can continue to serve our listeners and viewers and bring them information that's crucial to their daily lives, like when we have tornado warnings, like when we do programs about like the snow that hit us and paralyzed us. All of that happens because radio and TV stations who are facing increasing costs or declining revenues because of big tech, we have to stay in business to be able to provide those local services. I thank you for your consideration. I hope strongly that this committee will vote no on 1069, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gladner. Are there any questions by the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Seeing no one else sign up to speak for or against the bill, Representative Meeks, you're recognized to close for your bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. We've been here for about an hour discussing this issue. Once again, as I had mentioned before, this is a decision that's going to affect the life, the health, well-being of every citizen of our state. This decision has consequences. On the one hand, as you heard from the broadcasters, there's concern that it might create some confusion, and I don't deny that. But let's weigh the cost here for us to continue doing this. We know by doing this that the suicide rates in Arkansas are going to be higher, which means every year, if we vote this down, we're going to lose more of our citizens to suicide. We know rates of depression, anxiety, those are going to increase. We know that student achievements, if we continue down this path, we are harming our students and their ability to score academically. We know that overall, while there is some benefit to certain segments of the economy, overall, the net effect to the economy by continuing daylight saving time is negative. And finally, just the overall health, we've all felt the impacts of this. We all understand that by continuing on daylight saving time, there is going to be a cost. Every human is designed so that our biological clocks are synced with the sun. When we work in concert with nature, we have our healthiest selves. When we fight against nature artificially, even by an hour, there's a consequence to that. And so I hope this morning that you'll stand with me and say, Arkansas is going to be a leader in this. We're going to be bold. We're going to take that first step and do what's in the best health, welfare, and interest of our citizens. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am closed and would make a motion do pass as amended on 1069.
All right, Representative Meeks has made a motion do pass as amended. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The noes have it. All right. The bill has failed.